Almost 4.5 million Nicaraguans are called to participate in the general elections on this November 7th. On this, teleSUR talks to Max Blumenthal, editor and author. Hello, Max. So far, reliable polls are predicted that the running mates Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo will be re-elected this Sunday. Do you agree, or do you think there could be a surprise?
Well, if you look at the polling from M&R Consulting, which is the major independent polling firm in Nicaragua, it appears pretty clear that Ortega and Murillo are the most popular candidates. They have the most powerful get out the vote machine. They have a 2 million strong party. However, I've talked to some sources in Nicaragua who tell me they're concerned about the youth vote, that youth who don't remember the history of the Nicaraguan Revolution, the struggle throughout the 1980s, or the neoliberal period and the pain that it brought Nicaragua, will not either turn out for the Sandinista front or will boycott the vote. And of course, the opposition is encouraging some kind of boycott to show mass discontent. But by all accounts, it appears clear that there should be an Ortega victory, but my sources around the party are telling me they're expecting anything.
The mainstream press speculates that the current government of Daniel Ortega allegedly does not allow the democratic participation of certain opposition leaders who have been prosecuted. Who are those opposition leaders? Whose interests do they serve? Are they really invested in the welfare of the Nicaraguan people?
Well, if you look at the US press, you would think that no other parties are running, and you have something like 7 or 8 opposition parties running, including the Liberal Party, which is a major opposition force that has competed in several elections and come very close to victory. So what's the problem with these supposed pre-candidates who actually were never certified as serious candidates, who are in detention now? A key figure is Felix Maradiaga, who bounces from party to party, has no real constituency, but is very popular in Washington. And he has been funded through US intelligence cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, as he sought to foment regime change and destabilization operations, culminating in the 55 days of terror that Nicaragua experienced from April to June in 2018. Maradiaga's wife, Berta Valle, has been on major television programs condemning Ortega and calling for regime change in past days. She testified in Congress in support of sanctions. And you have several other figures, Juan Sebastian Chamorro, and the figures around the Chamorro Foundation, which has been funded by the United States to foment destabilization and violence through media. These figures are unlike other candidates in history because they are essentially assets of the US government who are getting their marching orders from Washington, not the Nicaraguan people. And we saw the deadly consequences in 2018.
Max, like you've said, in 2018, Nicaragua was the center, as have also been Venezuela and more recently Cuba, of violent street acts against a progressive government. Will the discontent of these opposition sectors be reflected in the November 7 elections?
Well, the polls from M&R polling show that the Nicaraguan people overwhelmingly do not want to go back to the moment of 2018 when the country was, large parts of the country were under siege. There were roadblocks known as tranques all around the country that shut down the economy. Motorists and common people were terrorized at these roadblocks. Opposition right-wing hooligans had taken control of the center of cities like Masaya. Sandinista activists had their homes burned. People were tortured, kidnapped. And I was there in July 2018 to interview the survivors of this wave of terror. Their voices were never heard by US media. the US media portrays this simply as a bunch of peaceful protests. But the Nicaraguan people, including people not affiliated with the Sandinista Front, know what the country went through. They want to have a strong, robust economy. They want peace and stability. And so they are not wanting to go back to that moment. But the opposition, the extreme figures of the opposition, the Chamorros, the Maradiagas, that's their goal.
Do you think, Max, that the radical opponents who receive orders, like you've said, from the White House, will stand idly by if Daniel Ortega is reelected? What social political scenario could the Central American country face from this Sunday on?
Well, from my reporting inside Nicaragua in 2018 and afterwards, it was my impression that the Sandinista Front and the security services were somewhat caught off guard, although they knew something was coming. This time, they're very well prepared and they understand the stakes as well as the tactics of the opposition. And that is why you've seen some of the key architects of the destabilization operation, the coup attempt in 2018, having been detained. So I don't know if there's any operational space for the opposition immediately after the election. And that's why they've turned to Washington and are placing their bets on the Renacer Act, where Washington will impose harsh sanctions on Nicaragua immediately after elections that Washington will refuse to recognize.
And finally, Max, why is, according to your experience, so important this election, this presidential and general election in Nicaragua, not only for Nicaraguans, but for Latin America, the Caribbean?
Well, this election will be a certification of the Sandinista era. The return of the Sandinistas to power and a validation of their achievements since the very dark period of neoliberalism under the rule of Violeta Chamorro and Enrique Bolaños, where nothing was achieved for the country. Since then, since 2006 election of Ortega, we've seen roads built all around the country, cancer clinics in the countryside, extreme poverty reduced, illiteracy reduced, women's participation reached levels that are not only unprecedented in Nicaragua, but across the Western Hemisphere. And all of these achievements will be certified against extreme increasing pressure from Washington. And, you know, we're seeing a return to the hybrid war that Washington waged in the 1980s. So the Nicaraguan people are saying that they are willing to withstand that in order to continue making these gains. And that sends a signal to the rest of the continent that the pink tide never ended. The tide recedes and it comes back. And I think right now there is a rising tide of populism and anti-imperialism and support for a new world among the people of Latin America.
Max, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ray.